Well, welcome. I have my friend here, Dave DeBaeremaeker, and I just wanted to give him a little bit of an interview because he's had quite an interesting journey, haven't you, Dave?
I have had.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I've known Dave for a few years now. We met on the Google Plus platform.
Yep.
Probably through, I don't know what communities, but
So the scavenger hunt. Mostly.
scavenger hunt. Yeah, the Krista Ray photography scavenger hunt. And it was a few years back now. What was it, 2015 that we went across Canada?
Yes, it was.
So I met Dave in person in 2015. And there was a little bit of chatter about going across Canada, meeting some fellow scavengers along the way. We met Sandra Parlow in Winnipeg, and Liz Kenner-Henry came along for the
Yep.
ride. And we went out to Ottawa and met Derek Kind.
Yep.
And
We camped in Pat Dixon's backyard.
that's right. We camped in Pat Dixon's backyard. And then we made our way all the way out to Red Deer, Alberta, where we connected with Krista Ray herself and with
Paul Howard. Yeah.
Paul Howard as well. And we did a studio day. And what I remember most about that trip is that at the time, Dave wouldn't have called himself a photographer. He was a geocacher, and it was your wife that was doing more of the photography, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was supporting her mainly on those trips.
Yeah. So Debbie and Dave are geocachers, and while we went across Canada, we kept stopping at these places. The interesting thing about geocaching, and I tell this story, and I know Dave will forgive me, is that it kind of took us away from the ideal photographic opportunities at the right times of day because we needed to be at the right times of day for the geocaching. And so I was a passenger on the trip, and we were doing geocaching and fitting photography in. And
Yep.
so that was a little frustrating for me as a photographer. But I had the gracious, or they were so gracious as to let me come along for the ride. I just did my work. I was literally working in the backseat of the car on my computer while we went across Canada, and we visited, and we had a ton of fun.
It was great fun.
And at the time, you had a little toy that you brought with you.
Yep.
And you were taking pictures of the toy at monuments and stops along the way.
Yeah, little Lego minifig.
Yeah. And that may have been the beginning of what has become this incredible journey.
Pretty much is, yeah.
So for those of you who know Dave, you know he has a blog and a website, and he calls himself Studio Dave. And he specializes now in toy photography. And that was the beginning of what became you doing toy photography as a hobby, a passion, really.
Really, yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your toy photography.
I started out with Lego.
Yeah.
So little 1.5-inch figures and setting them up in various scenes. My very first scene was a couple stormtroopers, Lego stormtroopers, cutting up candy canes as if they were stacking firewood. That was my very first one. I did that for the hunt way back in the 5th round of the hunt.
Wow.
We're around 27 now, so that's a while ago. And it grew from there, and now I'm shooting mostly action figures,
Yeah.
setting up scenes either in a light box or in real life, and trying to make them look as realistic as possible and putting them in interesting scenes and using them to tell stories, which I think is really what I've learned about myself is I like to tell stories, and the toys really make that easier.
Yeah, and you're very good at it. For everyone that's watching this, you're going to be able to follow the links to check out Dave's work, and we'll highlight some of them through the video. He has really brought his work into a whole new realm. In fact, he's gotten quite good at it. I'm kind of proud of you, Dave, because Dave was also a student of mine in a mentoring program through the Arcanum.
Yep.
And you had a bit of a breakthrough in pursuing toy photography during that time. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, at the time, I didn't think anybody would take toy photography seriously at all. I mean, it's literally an adult person playing with toys. So I didn't think anybody would really take it seriously. So kind of as a mental cover for myself, I declared myself a landscape photographer.
Yeah.
Then I joined the Arcanum kind of to learn better landscaping. And through a series of fortunate events, I ended up in your cohort. And I was going through as a landscape photographer. And then it was the very beginning of the creative cohort.
Yeah. Cohort of Creative Mastery.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Ron went through this video, about an hour-long video of how he had this image of two swans, and he said he was about to throw it in. He didn't think it was that great. And then, but slowly he added a little detail here, a little dodge burn there, kind of molded the scene into from what it was in a camera to what was in his head as what it should look like. And it really became one of your masterpiece images.
Yeah, it was the first one Google picked up, and it actually has over 1.5 billion image views on Google.
Yeah.
It became a signature image.
Yeah. And the lesson I took away from that was that I wasn't tied to just what was in the camera. It kind of gave me the permission to make the photography what I wanted it to be, not what I thought somebody else should think it should be. And it was right from that, the first thing I did was I just said, okay, I'm going to take a toy shot and bring it to the cohort as my work, which is the first time I did that. So I went to my studio, which is just a table in my basement. And I made a little scene of Han Solo, frozen in carbonite, and Indiana Jones. The joke being is that they're both the same actor, if you're not familiar. And it was Indiana Jones discovering with the torchlight his kind of alter ego frozen in carbonite in a tomb. And that was the first toy photo that I actually kind of brought to brought as a representation of the work that represented me, not just what I thought other people should do. And people seem to like it, and it's kind of grown from there.
It's grown in big ways. I have a saying, it's do what you can't help but do. And when I teach people, when they're in my mentoring programs, I really lean into who you are, your character, and what you bring to the table, and to own it and to go with it. And you've done that in spades. So I'd just love to share, we're going to really fast forward. I know that community style education and support has been really important, from the scavenger hunt to the Arcanum to even continuing on Facebook in the ways we're trying to find ways to continue in community.
Right.
But all of that really fed your creative soul. This year, it culminated in what I would call a lifetime milestone. This year, you received the Scott Kelby Guru Award in Photoshop for your image manipulations.
Yes.
And you were featured in Photoshop User Magazine.
I was.
And you were able to go down to Las Vegas. And did you go over
to Orlando?
To Orlando. You went to Orlando. Sorry.
Yeah.
And so you had your work featured there.
Yep.
So tell me just a bit about that experience of submitting to that and then hearing that you were the winner.
Yeah. Well, the image itself is, I was at Disney World in February and at Animal Kingdom, and they have this tree of life, which is a massive tree that has animal carvings on it. And so I took a picture of that. When I went back home, and I decided it's a nice photo, but it needs more animals. So I just went through all my archives of visits to zoos and various things, grabbed some animals, composited them into that tree of life image, and then I just created the image. And it was just as a lark. It's just kind of a kill some time type thing. Then when Photoshop World came around for the Guru Awards, I decided to submit that in the Photoshop category. And then, not expecting anything to come of it, then I got an email saying, "Hey, you've been nominated," and they asked a bunch of clarifying questions about some of the stuff that's in there. And then, cool, being nominated is awesome. On my vision board was to submit and kind of my image to the Guru Awards. You're just knowing that other people will be looking at it in a judgmental way. And not judgmental way, but they'll be critical, looking at it critically. And people who didn't know me, I think, is the most important part. And then they went to the ceremony and they called my name. It was like, that was really, really quite amazing.
Yeah.
Just to have somebody who doesn't know me and doesn't have any vested interest, like it's not my friends who are just trying to make me feel good. It's not cohorts who kind of grown with me and kind of understand the journey and where I'm at.
Yeah.
It's coming, looking at it cold, saying, this is worthy of recognition, really gave me enough confidence to kind of say I'm actually doing something worthwhile.
Yeah.
I've actually achieved a level that that is of note.
Yeah, and literally by a jury of your peers, there are people and strangers that have said this work is at an expert level,
Right.
and it communicated really well. I love that piece. It's a really good piece.
Thank you.
And so, just to kind of sum this up, what would you say to somebody considering education and mentorship? Mentorship specifically, because that's what I specialize in, is helping small group community mentorship. But what would you say to somebody wanting to pursue their passion in regards to mentorship? What would that advice be?
Mentorship is incredibly rewarding. When I was kind of early on in my journey, one of the things that really frustrated me was I knew I wanted to get to a point, but I didn't know really what that final point was. I just knew it was more than what I was doing. And also I had no idea how to get there.
Yeah.
And you can't just like read a book and say, okay, this is the end and you're done. It's very much a journey. And the mentorship program, especially if it's a cohort of fellow people who are also on that same journey, it allows you to take those steps together. And the people who are in your cohort and your mentor understand where you're at and what you're trying to go as you discover it. And they can both be supportive in the sense of encouragement, but they can also provide the very important constructive feedback that's coming from a known place and from a trusted source that you really take to heart and use that to improve your game.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of takes you to the next steps on the journey. And because you're doing it together, you also have somebody to celebrate your successes with, which is also fantastic. Yeah. And just, to commiserate with your failure. Because failure's part of the game as well.
We're going to make mistakes. We're going to struggle.
You learn from mistakes.
Yeah.
You learn more from mistakes than you do from failures.
Yeah.
But understanding what the mistakes are and how you fell is the important part, and having other people have that perspective that also cares about your journey is very valuable.
Yeah. So as a mentor that has worked in community education, what I love to see is when people grow incrementally. We generally don't grow like from the beginning and then just make all these monumental shifts. Like one day you're bad and the next day you're good. Life unfolds, especially when we're learning something, and especially as it pertains to creativity. Life unfolds in incremental steps, needing that help with understanding what that very next thing on the journey is, and then taking that one step. It's not that big monumental thing like the day you got married or you got your first car. It's those little adjustments and tweaks along the way. And then after a little bit of time, you look in the rearview mirror and you realize, holy cow, look at how far I've come on this journey. And you don't really understand it until you look behind and say, all those little tiny steps have added up to that monumental shift.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Dave, I've always been honored and proud to have you in my cohorts and part of my education. Always honored to have you come here. He's up in Canada now visiting, so he came over to the studio for a live interview. And we're actually going to go into a photo shoot. I'm working on a series called The Beard, and he happens to have one. So we're going to do a photo shoot now before he has to.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
So thanks a lot for joining me, Dave.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for sharing about the journey and how mentorship has helped you as one of the things that helped get you to where you are today in your photography.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And thanks for watching. We'll talk to you again soon.
See you later.